Hello, this is Monsoon17 and this is a video detailing various aspects about the dimensional cipher. This video is also a part of a tutorial series that I'm trying to create to explain some of the more complex aspects of the New World. And hopefully by explaining them, it can add some depth towards the actual novel itself. So, I came up with the idea of the dimensional cipher after I pondered that thought one day. I was like, what makes something godlike? What makes something into a god? Because if you think about it, Poseidon, Zeus, the godlike figures of old, back in during Greek times, those things, those ideas of what a god was, well, we have every power that they have at their disposal. It's already in the hands of humans now, and in fact, we have people with much more power. People who can drop nuclear bombs that make the wrath and destruction of a storm look like nothing. And it made me think, what is it exactly that makes these, what made these things godlike, and what would make something into a godlike entity now? And I came up with the idea that it essentially means they can control things that we can't control as of yet. So it doesn't really matter what the god can do. It's much more relevant what the people can do that give this god a sense of context. So Zeus was a god because of thunder, and people didn't understand thunder, but once we figured out weather, he seems a lot less intimidating. And the exact same way with Apollo and all the other guys, we understand how the sun works, we understand how the stars work, and that sort of demystifies them. So I was thinking, what if there was a way to manipulate laws of nature that we can't manipulate? So for example, we can't just produce gravity out of nothing. We can't just create energy out of nothing, because there are laws in place that make that intrinsically impossible. And the way that I came up with it was with the cipher. I was like, there could be a code, right, that allows some godlike being to restructure the universe into whatever it wants. And I found that the idea of that fascinating, because I was like, if something else got a hold of this concept of this knowledge, then they themselves could elevate themselves into a godlike being and could create whole portions of this universe where they are considered a god. So schema's what came of that. I was like, damn, if an AI had that, what would they do? And then I was into lit RPG at the time, and bam, the New World was created. So that's essentially how I came up with the idea, and the cipher, integral part of it since the very beginning. So, and the way that I thought about it was, I was like, okay, I really like these nifty charts. I was thinking, okay, we got the first dimension, right? And it's pretty easy to manipulate the first dimension. Now, if you think about it, if there were little people that lived, or beings that lived within the first dimension, they probably would be completely just blown away by the tools that we have at our disposal, and we would be considered gods to them, right? And they wouldn't be able to comprehend the idea of a pencil marking onto a two-dimensional space. And so that makes us absurd. Then we have the second dimension, right? Well, the people who exist within the second dimension, Rick and Morty actually does a good job of exploring this, where they say Rick is sort of aware that he is a cartoon, and it makes it so that he mentions a lot of these points about the meaninglessness of his life, and how he is at the mercy of these writers and everything. And it just adds a whole nother layer of depth to him as a character. And it's very intriguing. I find that idea fascinating. And it shows that the tools that we have at our disposal to control his world, they bother him, and it deeply unsettles him as someone who understands it. So I was like, okay, well, if we move this up to the third dimension, then why can't that concept apply to us? So if there was a being that could tweak and control the various fundamental laws that we ourselves can't control, wouldn't that be deeply unsettling and kind of awe-provoking? Just as it would be for someone in this two-dimensional world to be able to produce, us being able to manipulate the various aspects of their world as well. Well, that's when I thought about it. I was like, okay, so if I'm going to create this code, it's going to have some limitations and stuff. And I was like, okay, it makes sense that it can only influence spaces, not things per se. So if you're going to write it, it has to be around a set container or space. So if you're doing something like, say I had the goal of this sphere, this very poorly drawn sphere. If my goal was to create a sphere, a sort of soccer ball or something that could float, then I would have to create, see this space of the ball itself. I would have to be able to take away the things that make it into a object that's weighed down by gravity. And I thought about it and I was like, well, that would take lightness. That would take, freedom, because it's free from gravity. It would take easiness, because it would have to be easy to move and everything else. And it would take chaos, right? Because it's usurping the natural order of how gravity operates. So this object is now working out of conjunction with the laws of reality. And basically, the thought behind it was you would need tremendous understanding of whatever it was that you were trying to manipulate with this dimensional code in order to properly create change. Because if you missed some of these steps, then you wouldn't come out with a ball that is gravity free. You would come out with a ball that is, has some other various set of effects. So if you missed some various quality of this, and obviously this isn't a incredibly well thought out example where I was like, okay, let me come up with a list of 100 different things, but it just illustrates that in order to create this kind of change, you need to have a profound level of understanding of the concepts that you're working with. And that is basically the idea of the cipher. You have tremendous understanding of something. You write it down within this cipher, using this code that you've learned, influencing a certain space to create the change of whatever concept it is that you have a profound level of understanding of. And if you don't, it doesn't work. And it can actually create very bad outcomes, because whenever you take several things that don't quite coincide or create an incomplete picture, it's sort of like creating an incomplete human. If you shaved off this portion of my face and bam, just cleaved it away, it would create this horrible picture. Or if you took one quality away from me, like my skin, for instance, if you forgot to put that in there, then all of a sudden it would be this horrific, outcome from this experiment. And that was what I was exploring with the idea of Yom and all those other people, and with the idea of this cipher. So hopefully you guys found this video enlightening and hopefully interesting. And maybe if you're a fellow writer or someone else, you can sort of get an idea of how this could help you with your own fiction. So regardless, Monster 117, this was my video about the cipher, and see you guys later.